going to the gym, right? It would be amazing if on January 3rd, we could go to the gym and we could eat healthy for the day. And it's like, okay, I'm going to go and exercise for 8 hours today, and I'm going to eat healthy today, and I can mail it in the rest of the year, right? I can have donuts. I don't have to exercise. That's not going to necessarily get us to a level of health and going through, but we have to keep the processes going. And over time, you start opening up different ways that you can really engage and retain your people.
Anybody that's heard me speak knows that behaviors and the things you can't teach are so important when recruiting and retaining the best employees. You see, most people are driven by something that they might struggle to talk about. And when we focus on the things that drive them and we focus on their strengths, we are able to engage people at a higher level, we are able to energize them, and we are able to build more successful teams. Today's guest is the co-founder of 34 Strong, and they work with leadership teams to help people uncover their strengths and become strength-based leaders. I want to welcome to today's show, co-founder of 34 Strong, Darren Virassammy. Darren, welcome to the show.
Ryan, it's great to see you again and be chatting. Thanks for having me.
It's been a while. Lots of things have changed. I've been looking forward to recording this with you. I'm going to ask this question because you work with a lot of business leaders, a lot of corporate leaders, and you probably see some things that are holding leaders back. Some things that they believe they're holding on to, they won't let go of. And you're like, if you would just let go of this myth that you tell yourself every day, you would be able to have the success that you want. What do you see is one of the biggest myths that's holding leaders back?
Structure and systems solely over people. So what do I mean by that, Ryan? Structure and systems. I'm a chief operating officer in 34 Strong as an entrepreneur. I really appreciate structure and systems. What can happen a lot of times in businesses and for entrepreneurs, we think that if we just build the system and we haven't factored in those 50, those 80 employees and what their reactions and their responses are going to be, that we can just solve it by creating a system or a structure and not think of how the culture integrates into that, we're going to have some pretty big misses. And that could actually set us back and set us kind of sideways in what we're doing. So what was fascinating was coming out of the pandemic, to just give a real world example of this. The pandemic really brought this to life with some of our clients that we work with, Ryan, because the amount of times that we heard, wow, I really didn't understand how important it was to understand the needs of my people until now. Because it was just follow the orders, do this, here's the structure, here's the process for doing it, just do it this way. But when people now had coworkers that were their cat, right? Their dog, their kids, their spouse in the other room going through, and all of these different pieces, the reality of humans being humans and having human reactions within side of a structure and a system, we have to understand that and give way to understanding the very unique responses that people are going to have to be able to really maximize the direction of where it is that we want to go, where we want to take them individually, and where we want to take the company. So please don't hear that as systems and structures don't matter. They're very important. But just like the whole notion of yin and yang, you got to make sure that we're thinking about how the people and the culture falls into that system. And last thing I'll say, I think that's what is so brilliant about the CoreFit hiring system that you have, because it looks like it's taking that into the mindset of it's a system, and it's very focused on the cultural components to get those gears moving and in the right direction.
Yeah, I find that a lot of entrepreneurs and business leaders, they have a tendency to put all their energy towards either the systems or all their energy towards the people. And they don't realize that it's a balancing act. Like, you have to work both, because what most people need is a system, or they need you giving them specific, explicit instructions, which we don't have time to do.
Yep.
So the system keeps them there.
Exactly.
But then you have to understand you've got a human being, like I like to say, with hopes, goals, dreams, doubts, fears, drama, all the things that come along with being a human that have to fit into that system as well. And if it doesn't, then you're going to have to look at that, and you're going to have conversations. You're going to have to better understand your people, because the system isn't going to solve some of the stuff that they're going through.
Just like the people won't as well. And I think the important clarifying point is you can take exactly what I said in the complete opposite order, right? Like, because
Yes.
depending on the entrepreneur that you are, depending on the business owner that you are, or the industry that you're in, we're going to have a leaning in one way or the other. But it's important to make sure that you're looking at both, because I've even seen leaders, and Ryan, I'm sure you've seen this as well, where they're really heavy people, and then they go into a system and then they just try and force the whole system and then stop considering the ramifications of that system implementation to the people and what the real timeline is going to be like that. Well, we're just going to get the system and it's going to, and we'll just do this and check the boxes, even though they've traditionally been the people person or people type of leader.
Yeah. We talk about applicant tracking systems a lot in the work I do. It's a system, it's software application. And the question I always get asked is, which is the best one? Which is the best one out there? And my answer is always the same. It's the one your people use.
That's it.
That's the best one.
That's the best one.
Because they all do the same thing. But if your people are against it, or they're not feeling like it's there to support them, it's just not going to work. Same thing with assessments. I just did a little workshop tour. It was in another city speaking, and every single workshop, somebody asked me, what do you think of assessments? What's the best behavioral assessment? We use DISC, which is the best one. And I was like, the best one is the one that goes beyond we took it when we hired them and then filed it away.
That's right. Exactly. Or it's on your door and then you ask somebody, well, what is that? Tell me, what does that mean? And they have no idea what it means. Like, I don't know. It's something that we did at a workshop once, like 3 years ago. And I really like the coloration of,
the bar chart. Yeah.
So it's become an artifact or something, but I couldn't tell you how it works and how we apply it. And that's a really critical piece of the puzzle as well.
And that's the part, I think, with systems and processes, is that you understand that systems and processes in a vacuum do nothing.
Exactly.
They're run by people.
Very much so.
Imperfect people. We have to understand some of that. So at 34 Strong, you actually work with companies and leaders on some of the stuff that we're talking about, better understanding the people and how you create an impact for them individually, but also as teams. Can you tell me a little bit more about how that works?
Yeah, I sure can. So in our world, Ryan, we're in the space of really workforce development. We do a lot of work in the space of employee engagement. We take a strengths-based approach to human development, really trying to understand people's different strengths that they might have. There's many assessments and tools that are out there that can help identify that, and we can work within different organizations to do that. Over the years, we've done a lot of work with Clifton Strengths on our side of the house, but regardless of that, there's this notion of strengths-based thinking. So what does that mean? It's understanding what people bring as their best. We oftentimes spend a lot of time focused on the areas of weakness that we might have individually and that people on our teams have individually. Now, your listeners aren't going to see this, but this is my handwritten notes. You can't read it. And you know what, Ryan? I usually can't read it, but I've been writing now for 40-something years, handwriting, and it still sucks. And if you have me write with my non-dominant hand, my left hand, it's really bad as well. The whole point here that I'm getting at is in leadership development, in workforce culture development, right? It's easy to go through, hey, what's the weakest thing that somebody does? And that's the area that we want to invest in and spend our time with. And we think that's where we're going to maximize our results. But yet, when we move out of this space of what's popularized in our thinking, we move over to sports. We move over to the arts. We understand that Michael Phelps is an absolutely incredible swimmer. Now, with his body type, he might not be the best lineman on a football team, right? But he's got a lot of talent. He's a very talented athlete, and we can understand that. We can understand that somebody who is a talented lineman on a football team would not be able to compete with Michael Phelps in the swimming pool. We understand that, and physically we can see that. But yet, when we think of our brains and how that works and how that shows up in the workplace, we don't think in those terms. We just think everybody can do it. And because, it's easy for me, so therefore it should be easy for you. So one nugget here to move out of the analogies that's very applicable. If you're running a team and you're leading a team and you catch yourself going, well, anybody can do that, or it's really easy to do, that is a great time for you to pause, because what that's a tell of from the self-awareness lens as a leader, it's really easy for you to do. It's something that comes very naturally to you, and that's great. But to blanket apply that to others is not the case. And an example of this, and then I'll pause, is some people might be really good at naturally seeing a big project, right? They might have a project and they might look at the whole project that's going to take 6 months. Hey, we've got this building, we've got the blueprints, we've got a start date, and they can see the whole project. And they naturally think, okay, well, this is a 6-month project. I know exactly how to break this into these 8 phases, right? I've got to pour my foundation, but before I pour my foundation, I need to dig the footings. I got to lay down the plumbing and the electrical. I got to get it inspected. So I'm going to count phase 1 as just the foundational components. Phase 2 is going to be doing the framing. I'm not going to go through all 8 phases or whatever it is, but each different phase, they can naturally break down a project in seeing it in their mind in those different phases. Now, somebody else might have such a bird's eye view, not of that single project, but how that project now integrates into the 80 other projects that the company wants to do. But the process of breaking it, that single project, into 10 phases can be really challenging for them. Both of those people have a lot of value that they could add to your organization. But if you've got the person that's taking the eagle eye view and you're trying to force him or her into a place where they can think very much like, here's the phases, they might do okay for a time, but then they revert back to, well, what about when we think about this project 2 years from now and how it scales for our company and all the other things that it can lead into and all the other areas? We're going to struggle with that over time. So when we can actually embrace people in where they're at and understand their strengths, that's going to be the greatest opportunity for their growth into a capacity of excellence. If we want to focus on mediocrity, hey, you could be like me, keep investing in your handwriting, right? And this is as good as it gets. This is as good as it gets, man. Yeah. This is it. This is it.
What you're talking about is the exact reason that I found Clifton Strengths. Is I remember I was really struggling in the business development space, and I was working with a sales coach, and I was just like, I don't enjoy this. And I'm like, no, you don't have to like it. You just have to do it. And I'm like, but I don't feel I'm not confident because I don't feel good at it. I don't think you just need to keep working on it. You just need to get better. I said, there's got to be a better way to do this. And so I think it was strengths-based selling or something along those lines. And I was like, wait a minute, what is this assessment that's going to help me with my strengths? And I worked with a coach, and basically what it came down to was, Ryan, your strengths are selling from the front of the room on a stage, helping people see their vision, help them go, this is how I get from point A to point B. I can see a point B now. And that was one of my strengths. And I started doing that. And then I learned how to speak. I learned how to present. I learned how to do all of that. And things have become, that's my primary way for business development now. But it's also helped me be a better trainer, a better coach, because I'm focusing on the things that I'm naturally good at that come easy to me. And what I like to say, they energize me. Because if I'm doing the things that don't, I get depleted, I get burnt out, I need to recharge, and I'm not as effective if I'm just focusing on the things that I'm not good at. Because for me, usually if I'm not good at it, I don't like doing it.
Ryan, I got to drop a nugget for your listeners here.
Stop turning away work, burning out your team, and working so hard. Learn about the proven process that businesses everywhere are using to save time, save money, and hire all the people they need. We'll train your team to implement and run this process in-house so you can grow as fast as you want. Book a call with our team at corematters.com.
Because I think what you just said is so huge. What energizes you? Simple question to ask in the development process with team members. And it's important for leaders to start with this place, because we got to start with self-awareness. Like you did, Ryan, like where you're in the place where you had this awareness of, hey, I don't really sell within the structure of the system, but here's how I show up. That was a level of self-awareness. And you were asking a key question of, does it energize me? And I think an important piece that we can ask of ourselves first, but then of our team. And this is something that really is good to evaluate in regular iterations what energizes you and what exhausts you in your work. It's really that simple. Like just having a list, one side, energy, one side of it, exhaustion, and just kind of brain dumping on that. And what you start finding out, especially when you're in a smaller team that's concentrated, even if you're an organization of 100, 200 people, you're going to have those small clusters of teams that work to support different elements of the mission, right? 5 people teams, 6 people, 8 people teams. And those are pretty concentrated groupings. But what you might find, you and I might go through that. We might be working together on a project and it might be, oh my gosh, nobody likes doing Excel spreadsheets. And then all of a sudden on your energy list, Excel spreadsheets. You love doing that. You love doing pivot tables. And I'm like, wait a minute. Well, why should I be doing that? We're working on this. Let's look at the whole win. And sometimes it's not that you're fully taking things off of certain people's plates and then adding things back to their plates. Sometimes it's just removing 1 or 2 things because you're going to have spaces in our work and your team's going to have spaces in your work where there's going to be grind along those lines. But that whole notion of what energizes you and what exhausts you is a very simple question that we can ask.
You know, I used to think that the same people that love to complete a checklist would love to create the checklist. And I learned real early on that checklist completers and checklist creators, they are different people. And what I would do is I would say, well, you're going to be the one completing the checklist. So why don't you just go ahead and create the checklist? And it never worked out. Things always got missed. It took way too long. It was overthought. But if I can give them the checklist, they are the most amazing people at completing checklists. And we need those people.
That is just an example of talent. Yeah, exactly. And that's examples of different diversity of talent that exists within people. And if you can open that up in people and show them not only for them individually that they can do that, but that's intrinsic in your culture, you move the core fit hiring system becomes the core fit retention system as well. Like in kind of going through it, it's that full ecosystem, and that retention system will then fold right back to attracting the right talent, which is what we got to do to find the right talent. But you got to have that internal brand that your employees feel for what it's like.
So I can picture a lot of these leaders saying, you know what, Darren, that is awesome. Yes. What energizes you? What exhausts you? But every time I ask my people, the people on my team, a question like that, I just get blank stares, or I get the shrug shoulders, or the, I don't know, because they've never thought about it, because they've never been asked that question before. What advice would you have for those leaders who are struggling to get really good answers or quality answers from their team around these things? How do they coach or mentor? Is there any tips or tricks that you found that have worked?
Yeah, these are very common for us to get some of these blank stares out of the gate. And here's the thing, you got to start somewhere. So getting into the habit of asking different types of questions like this. Another one that might get blank stares, another great question that we ask in our guides for how to set clear expectations with employees. How do you best learn? That's another powerful question. People will look at you and they'll give you blank stares. Well, I don't know. I just learn. Well, do you do better by reading something? Do you do better by talking it out? Do you need time to review and sit with it and think about it? Or are you a person that just verbally processes? So sometimes giving examples can help start. And you're still, let's make it very clear, you're still going to get blank stares and going through. You're going to get some people going through the exercise and it's blank the first time.
Sure.
And yet you keep on doing it. Just like a seed has to take traction in the soil and fight to break through the soil for the roots to take root and then for the plant to grow. That's how culture is. And you have to have these questions and these conversations regularly. If we do it once every 6 months or once a year, you're not going to get anywhere. But when we're doing this regularly in one-to-ones with people, so first step is you got to have the regular one-to-ones, right? Like in kind of going through that. And this doesn't have to be a whole formal, you have to come sit in somebody's office. I realize, hey, you might be out on a job site or you might be out and about in the field working on a project and going through whatever your industry is that you're in. It could just be conversation you're having in the hallway walking down to maybe the next meeting, but you're going through and you're getting these questions going through and giving people permission to say, hey, it's okay if you don't have an answer to this now, but I want you to think about that. Because right there, Ryan, you're actually identifying their learning style, because they might be a person you throw it on the spot. Hey, I need you to do this. And you got 2 minutes. Because, well, for me, if I was asked that question, I know how to do it in 2 minutes. And I think more as a verbal processor. I'm not validating the needs of my people. But if I'm saying, hey, take some time, sit with this, think. In fact, come back. Let's meet on this next week. I want to give you some time to think through it. And we keep going through, you'll start figuring out what makes different people tick and what makes different people talk and how that all comes together in the organization.
I think, for me, 2 things you just said that really stood out for me. Number one, the consistency.
Yeah.
You can't just go, well, they didn't answer me, so I guess I'll ask next year. Like, you have to be consistent with that. But I think the big thing for me was you wrapped up with is that remember that not everybody's like you.
That's the key.
So just because it's easy for you to verbally process and have a conversation and be done, sometimes people just need to step away, spend some time thinking about it, and then come back to you and they'll have a better answer. So don't get frustrated with your people if they're not as responsive as you'd like, or they're not on top of it as much as you'd like.
Sometimes those blank stares, one of the things that we've learned in our work with evaluating and studying people's talents, sometimes those blank stares are blank stares. That's all they are. Sometimes they're people very much in the thinking cycle and giving them the space to think and to reflect, and they need some time to ruminate on that. And that's why asking that question that was parked in there, how do you best learn? Do you need time to think about things? Are you more of a verbal processor, meaning that you have to talk out, put it all out, and it sounds like you're convinced on what you're saying, but you weren't even really there. You're actually just speaking it out to actually realize how you feel about what you're saying, which will then determine, do I actually think that or not? And other people, they're going to go through that very much in their head. They're going to, if we go this way, this is how I'm going to feel. This is how so-and-so is going to feel. Is this the right way? And we'll go through. Different people will have different needs. So identifying those needs will start opening up the door and taking the steps. Culture is kind of like bathing, right? It only works if you do it at regular intervals. We can't do like a culture experience or an employee development experience on the first day of the year and then just throw in the towel for the rest of the year. I think Simon Sinek, I'm going to give him credit for this one. He gave an analogy of like going to the gym, right? It would be amazing if on January 3rd, we could go to the gym and we could eat healthy for the day and just like, okay, I'm going to go and exercise for 8 hours today and I'm going to eat healthy today and I can mail it in the rest of the year, right? I can have donuts. I don't have to exercise. That's not going to necessarily get us to a level of health and going through, but we have to keep the processes going. And over time, you start opening up different ways that you can really engage and retain your people, because that is the biggest attractor of who else is going to show up at your door for the future.
Absolutely. You said something too, and I just want to echo this, that yes, when you are working with people, there are feelings involved. And you had mentioned it, how people feel, how you feel, how they feel. Yes, there are feelings involved. Doesn't mean everything's touchy-feely, but there are feelings involved because you are working with human beings. So don't shy away from this because you're afraid for feelings to come out and be a part of this process.
We always say, Ryan, within that element, it's not about this whole touchy-feeliness that we need to go and have a kumbaya moment and all go cry in the corner. It has nothing to do with that. It's basically this. We're humans first, so no matter how good the system is and how good the structure is, we're going to have a human response that then integrates into the system response. And we have to allow room for that to show up. And by human response, that might not be emotional. Okay, that might be I have a human response. The way that I'm wired, my human response is when I'm asked a question, I really need some time to ponder. Or when I am if I need to present something, I'm going to do a lot better if I'm given a longer time window to really get into my space and going through. I'm not going to be as effective at getting up in front of the room and presenting, but I know Ryan will. But I could do a lot of the background stuff. I love doing the background stuff that's going to set Ryan up for giving a crushing presentation. Those are the human responses that we have to factor in. So when we say the feel, it's not just the emotional feel of, oh, I'm sad, I'm happy, I'm angry. It has to do with how we're actually wired, the human responsiveness in our thinking, not just the reaction, the responsiveness, the thoughtfulness that goes into that for each of us. And it's going to be unique.
Wow. We could keep talking about this forever. I know we could, because the thing about humans is they're complex.
I know.
And there's so many different things.
Complex. Yes.
I think the bottom line is understand, I like how we started, structures and systems can't live in a vacuum, and just working on people can't live in a vacuum. You got to work on them together. They have to correlate. And then people have different strengths, and people are going to be good at one thing and not good at another. And that doesn't mean that we focus on fixing their weaknesses, because that takes a lot of energy. We talked about the energy and how important it is for people to be energized in the work that they do. And then really just that consistency in leadership, and that consistency in caring, and that consistency in how does that make you feel? What's working? What are your thoughts on this? So that we're able to get that feedback and really keep our people engaged. Because I love how you said it, but there is a core fit retention system inside of the core fit hiring system. And you have to retain your people. We see so many people say, I have a hiring problem. And then we quiz them and they don't. There are plenty of people. They've hired hundreds of people, but they only have 40 people on their team because they just keep going through them. They have a retention problem that can be solved as well. Darren, this was awesome. Thank you so much. I'm so glad we're finally able to get together after a couple of years. I don't want to wait that long. There is so much knowledge that you have about this, and building teams and keeping people, and really just getting people to better communicate. So thank you, Darren, for being my guest today. Really enjoyed the show.
Ryan, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it and look forward to our next conversation.